Welcome to Evangelicalish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American Evangelical Church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. Join us for these episodes live on our Evangelicalish YouTube page on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 o'clock Pacific. Let's journey together. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Evangelicalish. I'm April.
I'm Jeremy.
I'm Paul.
And we are here. It is currently a Wednesday night, but maybe you're listening and it's Friday or Saturday or who knows what it is. But it's February. February is upon us.
Can you believe it? It's already February.
Happy Black History Month.
Yes, yes. It's also my birthday month.
Nice.
Just throwing that out there. And it's also our Evangelicalish anniversary month. Yes. And in fact, next week we're having our 2-year anniversary show. So I can't believe we've been doing this for 2 years.
Do we get cake?
I don't know. Do we do cake? We didn't do cake the first year.
Well, I feel like one is like, it's like, cool, we did 1 year. 2 years for a podcast, though. That's like,
that's not nothing. We're toddlers now. We're starting to walk.
We can walk. We can say like 7 words. It's so cool. Yeah. And
maybe we can all DoorDash a piece of cake together or something next week.
That would be hilarious. Oh man!
Like come during the show.
Yeah,
bring the DoorDash person on the air.
Good idea.
Okay.
Good idea.
Interview our DoorDash person.
Hi, Kyle. Welcome to the show.
So I don't housekeeping things. Leave us a review. I don't remember all the things that we do. We have a ish community you can join. We're going to be sometime this month recording a private shows just for whoever signs up at any level. And we're going to go a little more, I don't know if risque is the right word because we say some pretty risque things on the show already, but just, I guess, be a little more honest than you can on a live
in front of the entire internet.
Potentially.
Yeah, it'll all be private there.
Kate asked what my sign is, and
what
I'm a
could
Pisces.
Possibly go wrong?
I am a Pisces. I really don't know what that means. I've always known that is what I am. So
I'm a Libra. You would be a Libra too, right, Jeremy?
I guess. I have no idea. Like I legit don't know. And it's not because I think it's voodoo or anything. I just like have never like paid any attention.
Do you know your Enneagram number?
No.
Okay. I was going to say Enneagram is basically the Christian version of your horoscope. That's what I said.
That's really great. No, I am who I am and I don't know. I don't know.
That's totally fine.
We didn't have our Enneagram forever, and we had friends who were like, how could you not know your Enneagram? And so I got shamed into doing it finally. So I'm an 8-wing 9, but I've done so much therapy, I'm wondering if I need to do it again and see if I'm
I think I need to do it again because I don't think I ever get accurate results, and I'm probably doing it wrong, but I always get different results, and I'm convinced that any type of personality designator or test like that, like I'm just untouchable. Like I beat the test. It can't figure me out.
I beat the test.
But what I really think
can you beat a personality test?
Well, what I really think it is, it's my inner brain deciding like what I should say, like what a good person would say and what I actually would say. And it's the conflict constantly. And it's me being aware of, am I saying this or am I just saying this because I should say this?
Am I a chameleon or am I crushing this personality test right now? It's like playing chess against a machine or something.
Is there anybody that doesn't do that though? You see, it's like, well, my answer should be,
I don't know,
but I kind of want it to be. But,
It's one of those moments when you kind of wish you were a psychopath a little bit. Like I'm just answering what I'm answering because I don't fucking care, like.
Well, before Enneagram, it was Myers-Briggs.
Right. Yeah. I remember Myers-Briggs.
And I went back and forth between an E and an I. I was like an ENTJ and then I was an INTF or an INTJ. And because I'm convinced I am not an introvert or an extrovert, I'm an ambivert because I'm both, depending on the moment. Again, I can't be tagged,
Yeah.
That's just me like convincing myself I'm just special and unique.
I don't remember the letters. I think I was like
special and unique, though.
I think I was an influencer, though. I think my letters added up to being an influencer, which is ironic, being on social media now.
So INF.
INF, that's right. INFJ, I think it was.
I've had somebody tell me that works for me, but I don't know if that's true.
Lori in the chat says she's an INFJ.
So and then we did disc test was a big one for us.
I don't remember that. I remember the strengths test
and strengths
you had to
finders.
find your strengths finders. I just is just a random funny story, and then we'll get to spilling the tea, which I know is why everybody's here.
Listen,
but
the numbers are going up this week.
I know, like we know why y'all are here.
You know what? We should have started the show tonight. Sorry to interrupt. We should have just started the show with like awkward silence,
just staring,
and everybody's like, "Oh my god, they're not talking."
I remember, I don't know if this is a good story to share or not, but Beecher was telling me when they were in high school, they took some kind of test that like it tells you what you should be when you grow up, like a job that you would be good at, and it told Beecher that they should be a tourist bus driver. And I remember Beecher was like, wow. Just like, what? That's so random. They lived like in like Podunk, Georgia. Like, who's gonna? That would be the weirdest tour bus driver. Anyway,
could be like a Civil War, place or something.
Yeah, I guess they would have those there, but anyway, moving on. Okay, so to the topic.
Somebody did mention there was a spiritual gifts test that the church.
Oh yeah, we've all taken those.
Yeah.
I got discernment.
Oh, of course you did. Yeah, nice. That makes a ton of sense. I could see it. And by the way, full transparency, like I think some of those spiritual gifts, like just the way that those things carry over a little bit, I think.
Oh yeah.
For sure. So, not the worst thing the church ever did, for sure. Yeah, I took him in seminary. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, are we diving in? We're diving in.
Let's dive in.
That's why you're all here. Listen, you're all here. So April posted a video yesterday that just basically said that we had a pretty tough conversation yesterday during our regularly scheduled pre-show meeting, which happens on Tuesday mornings. For those of you wondering in the evangelicalish universe, when does the pre-show meeting happen? It happens on Tuesday mornings at 9:30 a.m. Central, 8:30 a.m. Mountain West. Okay. Because that's
early for me.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And Paul rolls out of bed and shows up. And so it's traditionally a really great time, just because we have some personal conversation and, dive into our topics and usually get a chance to connect with, like, if we're going to have a guest on, that's when our guest connects. So I kind of want to peel back a few layers for y'all tonight to kind of let you into this. But over the past several months, especially post Nashville, because that event was so successful, I, as a 30,000 foot view, big dreamer person, saw a ton of potential, and we all did. We all saw a ton of potential for what evangelicalish is and the community that it's building and all of those things. And so without going into a ton of detail or going too far behind the scenes, we started planning some really big events and having some big ideas, and all of those things were true. In the process, what happened is that there was a few things that happened. First off, it's really great to have a bunch of really big ideas. But when you have big ideas and you're standing on A and you see all the way across the ocean to Z, it's really important to put the rest of the letters in place. I admittedly am not that person. I'm not good at that. I'm also very admittedly somebody who overcommits. And so we started to kind of navigate that together as a team, just some of the things that we started to witness some of our strengths and some of our weaknesses probably in a more magnified way. And especially I will definitely go out on a limb and say mine. So all of that we put a pause on some of that stuff. And all of those things kind of came to a head a week ago, and our pre-show meeting ended. I don't know. What's the best word? Awkward?
Cringy.
Maybe? Cringy. Yeah. The pre-show meeting ended cringy, awkward, not great.
And can I just interject into
absolutely.
that? Like I saw, and you can correct me, but from my perspective, I was seeing Jeremy shut down in the discussion. And so I tend to be somebody that wants to say, hey, is there something we need to clean up? Can we fix this? And there can be times where we say, no, I'm not ready. But what I saw from you, Jeremy, was just kind of no, forget it. I'm not going to talk about it. And I don't think those were your words. I'm putting words in your mouth there, but that's what I saw. And so for me, and then I had another meeting I had to go to. And so it did end cringy. And my heart was like, oh my God, because of my personality, I'm like, I'm going to die this week if I don't get this cleaned up. So that's kind of where I was at the end of that meeting.
Yeah. And that's actually something that really resonates with my church trauma as well. Like that desire to just fix it and clean it.
Which isn't my healthiest thing all the time either. I mean, there is a healthy part of me that says I want to be honest and talk this through, but then there's an unhealthy part of me that's like, oh my God, I can't have anybody mad at me.
So Paul's desire to not have someone mad at him met my desire to just recuse myself completely of the situation until I felt comfortable talking about it. But what that led to was radio silence on my end, a text from Paul where he was like, hey man, like, are we good? Like, do we need to talk about this some more? I was just like, fuck it. We'll talk about it on Tuesday. But I didn't say that. I just left it. Right.
It was also unfortunate circumstance.
Yeah. Now that was, yes.
Show
yeah. And that is actually fully true. I did have a toddler go into meltdown mode, or my pre-care went into meltdown mode. I guess she's not technically a toddler anymore. But my wife, a lot of y'all know, is a night nurse. And so she was gone, and it was just really bad timing because that hit right before the show. So I had to text them and be like, hey, I'm not going to be able to be on the show tonight. So then it just looks like I'm ditching and I'm avoiding. And so, and I think that there are things that come to the surface for all of us with this, but what eventually happened is that we met yesterday. And so fast forward to yesterday. And so, Paul asked me, hey, how are you doing? And I said, and I just gave him some pat answers about how my daytime job work life was going. And I was like, but it's all good. And he was like, well, but like, what about our stuff?
We're probably killing people right now. I see Jamie saying I'm on it.
No, I mean, I want to be fair. I want to share the story, right? Like I want to give it. We said we were going to give people the tea.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to give it to them fully, right? Like I don't want to be one of those shows that like dangles the carrot and then just pretends like it's all good.
Maybe we can say we're all here and we're all talking, so there is a good ending to this. So if your heart is struggling, just know there's a good end coming to it.
The punchline is good. Which,
by the way, is again another trigger for me. Is like you show up and I'm like, "Are you okay?" And you're like, "Yeah, like everything's great." And I'm like, "Shit, I've been dying for a week." And here's Jeremy, like, "Hey, everything's cool." So yeah.
So I think there's a lot of like trauma responses happening in the space, right? Like you are, you're feeling trauma from your perspective. I am masking and pushing down as hard as I can. Like, like these feelings, fuck these feelings. Like we're not going to address this, And so, yes, good ending. We swear. So finally Paul's like, well, but like what about the stuff from last week? And I was like, well, Jesus, Paul, like there's no way to dodge it now. Like we're just going to have to get it out here on the table. And so the bottom line is that we had some really hard conversation about a few things. About number one, kind of our expectations as a podcast and as a team. We had some really hard conversations about where we think we're going in the future. We had some really hard conversations about how fast we think we can, build community and grow and what that looks like and the pieces to put that together. But it built up to this place where, it built up to a place where it all felt, and this is where I have to be really honest, and I am just discovering this, so y'all bear with me. It built up to this place where I realized that I felt like I was losing my friends.
Feel the feels, baby. Feel the feels.
I don't want to feel. I don't want to feel the feels. God damn it.
It's all good.
Because before Evangelicalish ever started, we were 3 individual creators on TikTok who were speaking into the same space, who were being tagged constantly in each other's videos. And the beauty of that is not only did we see the people that were supporting us, but we saw that we weren't alone. And that people wanted to hear the voice that we were sharing and the things that we were saying. And that's where this started. So it's very pure, because what we decided in the very beginning was we wanted to do something together, not for clout, not for attention. Like we all had 20,000, 20,000 followers at the time or something like that. Like none of us had been on CNN or Today Show or, none of those things had happened yet. And, and so we decided hey, we want to do something that matters. Like we want to speak into this space because we feel like we're journeying here. And April says it every week, on the intro, let's journey together. And we laugh about that sometimes because we're we're tired of hearing about that, hearing that line, and we're rewriting some of that stuff as well behind the scenes. But that line holds so true because that's exactly what it is. This deconstruction, this faith journey, this, whatever it is, whatever you call it, we're all kind of in this same place and we're walking through this space together. And so the place that hit me really hard is that when we began kind of having these criticisms of one another, and at one point, I fully honestly felt ganged up on, and that's not true. And I don't believe that now, but at the time I felt ganged up on. And that's when I said, hey, y'all had a conversation outside of this space without me. You decided that you were going to say X, Y, and Z to me, and that's bullshit. And that's when Paul,
I yelled,
was less than happy.
One of my justice protector parts said, okay, I have had enough.
Yeah. Well, and I think me saying that was the place where I was like, I've had enough. You get to that place, and we just met in the middle, and here's poor April, trying to navigate this space with as much grace and humility as possible, because that's just who April is.
It's very hard to break up a virtual fight. There's only so much you can do.
Yeah. Oh man. And so, Paul was like, what did you say? And I was like, I feel ganged up on. I feel like y'all came in with a plan just to, kind of dogpile me or whatever. And he's like, how dare you, and just gets in. And so then I go into, I decide I'm not going to yell back. I'm going to be, be a pretentious ass, and I'm gonna be like, why are we yelling, Paul? Why are we yelling? You know? And he's yelling. He's like, I got to go get some coffee. And I'm like, you can't have a conversation like an adult. And then that's when he wheels back around, comes back into the camera, and it's like, what did you say?
Yes. And one of my things that I teach people in coaching, a tool, is like, when you are losing decorum, which I did, and I'm sorry that I did yell at you guys. You take a break, So I just thought, I'm going to get up, go get coffee so I can pull myself back together. And then you say, can you not have an adult conversation? And my response to that, of course, was, what? In my head, it was like, what the fuck did you say?
Yeah, no.
And I came and sat back down and slammed my coffee mug down. But
still empty, by the way.
Yeah, it's without coffee in it. It was, and I don't mean to cut off your story, but it was a point where I actually said to myself, okay, now we're getting honest. Now we're getting honest. And if we sparred a little bit longer, but I something inside me knew, like, okay, now we're getting honest. And if we can get through this, we're going to get to some honesty together. And because the three of us love each other, not to sound too campy, we're going to be able to get through it. So it was a very hard moment, but there was something inside of me that says, okay, now we're getting real with each other. And it's messy, but that's okay. So anyway.
We were at least talking, because we didn't even mention the part where there was literally at least a minute where we just stared at each other awkwardly and no one said anything.
Yeah, it did get really awkward. And I even said at one point, I was like, are we just going to sit here in awkward silence? Like, are y'all just going to let me hang out here like this? Because I was like trying to explain something and couldn't find the words to it. And Paul just sat there staring into the screen like, yeah, I'm going to let you hang out there like that. But what it boiled down to, and this is where we really want to go with the episode, because by the time this all wrapped up, we said, April goes, look, guys, like, I know we just walked through a lot, but like, and she's always really great about, like, we've got to get to the next step. We've got to get to the next step. And I love her for that.
I'm a type A personality.
Well, but you've also,
I guess I do go for personality things on that one.
But I think it's good, because while I'm very big picture and like the emotions of the space, and like I could have left that meeting and been like, oh fuck, well, we didn't pick a topic for tonight. Like, oh well, whatever. Like, you weren't going to let that happen. And I think that's what makes us all of us a great team, because we all bring different strengths to the table. But it was funny because Paul and I kind of looked in the camera, like, at each other at the same time. We're like, let's talk about this. Because what landed was this, and I had a very real realization. I mentioned earlier that I said that I felt like I was losing my friends. And the reason that I felt like I was losing my friends is because we were having critical analysis about some business decisions inside of the evangelicalish business that felt personal to me, and those lines got blurred. And here's why those lines got blurred. Because I have spent my entire life, and especially my life from the time I was 18, to 30, 31, on staff in evangelical churches, in evangelical spaces, full time. That's what I did for a living. That's what I went to college to do. I went to a Baptist school here in Oklahoma. I served in Baptist churches. And you are taught in those spaces that the church is not your job. The church is your life. Mm-hmm. And so your deepest relationships are also with the people that you work with. They're your, co-staff members. They're your deacons, the elders in the church, right? And so I have never learned in places where business or just like projects or whatever and spirituality combine, I have never learned how to not dilute those lines. And I feel like that is something that we have been so messed up with by the church, that we allow the church to control every little aspect of our lives, because I have lost so many good friendships, people that I trusted so deeply, because we had a disagreement on something theologically, or we had a disagreement about the direction of the church or the process of the church or the beliefs of the church. Things inside of the business we had a disagreement about, but it had personal effects. And so my brain did not know, and still probably doesn't know, because you can't learn it in 24 hours. My brain still doesn't understand how to disconnect the personal line of like, hey, I love you, like I appreciate you, but I think we need to talk about these things critically from a business perspective, or from a project perspective. And so,
and not take it personal,
because it's not personal. Yeah. Right. And so it gave me this huge realization of how deeply the church, this is the perfect example to refute that women are the emotional ones that, let their emotions
Sarah
get the
Kay
better
gave
of them.
us this comment that everyone has emotions, not just biological females.
And I admittedly always tell people, like in my marriage with my cishet wife, and I as a cishet, white male, like I am the more emotional one of the two of us by a landslide. But what I realized is how deeply the church has scarred us in places, and how it's just created bad habits and bad processes for us. And that when it consumes your life, it literally consumes everything. And so I fell into a space where I felt like I didn't see any way out, because I thought, well, y'all are being extremely critical of me. Y'all have taken sides against me. That earlier on, I felt that. And so therefore I'm now the odd man out, and therefore I'm no longer welcome here in this space. And those are things that we were taught inside of the evangelical church. And
in the evangelical church, when you're not together, you can't be in relationship. The blurring of business and accountability and relationship gets so mixed together that when somebody leaves the staff of a church or stops attending a church for any reason, now you can't have a relationship anymore, because relationship is based on agreement and placating one another and just taking it to Jesus. And I think in the church space, we're very, very afraid of emotions. And so I think some of what I came away with the other day is like, our emotions can get the best of us, but if we stop and listen to what's happening in that getting the best of us, we can hear something good that says, okay, that got the best of me because this part really hurts. And then we get down to the root. And that's what I loved about what you did. And April, I definitely want to hear how you were feeling in all of this. But when you were able, Jeremy, to tie it to like, I've lost a lot of relationships when things went south in the business of church. And so it was almost like you were having a PTSD is a hard one, because, we know soldiers go through so much more, but it's a trauma response of this hurt me before, and I'm afraid this is happening now. And so then it took some work from all of us to say, Jeremy, that's not what's happening right now.
I felt myself start cutting the ties to the parachute. You know what I mean? Like I was cutting away, and that was because I was like, I'm not going to get fucking hurt by you. Like I'm going to throw my hands up. I'm going to fight my way out of this corner. And when I get out of this corner, I'm going to run like hell. Because I mean, I think about and I talked about this in therapy today, I think about the last year, or two, as I've gone through this like a lot of my major transitions in just my theology and the way I see scripture and the way I see God, and like all of these things have changed, and just the way people have just discarded me like garbage. Like you become an affirming believer, and people who loved you forever are like, well, we can't associate with you anymore, And so obviously this is a much smaller scale thing than being affirming of people for who they are. That's very different, but in the same sense, it felt like, oh, we are not going to agree. You are criticizing me. Therefore, I have to cut off this. Like I can't, like I've got to get out before I get hurt again. And, yeah, so that's the, and I know that was probably a pretty long-winded way to share this story, but we promised people we would tell them the story, and I wanted to share it.
Yeah, and when we were deciding on what we were going to talk about this week, because we only had we had been meeting for almost 2 hours at that point, and we were all tired. And then Jeremy's like, I've got a crazy idea. What if we just talk about this and how we worked through it? And I mean, it was a pretty fast turnaround. I mean, there was the moment when it was real bad that I was like, I don't know if we're gonna recover, at least not before Wednesday. But we did, and I thought to myself earlier, if we were the evangelical church, what would have probably happened is we would have had this show tonight and would have mentioned that there was some scruffle, and you would have blamed me because I'm the women, and the two men would have just gone on and been great. But yeah, and then something that I've realized in me that I'm constantly having to unlearn from, I think especially being a woman in the church, is that I can be very abrasive and speak my mind. But that doesn't come naturally for me. It's what comes natural is my initial response is just keep the peace, be quiet, say what we need to say to fix this, and even with the business stuff, I can be unhappy and do certain things that I don't really want to be doing or whatever, and just not say anything because I can handle this. And, I don't want to cause trouble for other people. I don't want to be a quote unquote nag. It's all of these things that I think being a woman, I'm constantly having to unlearn. But I feel I was really proud of all of us for being honest and, and I hated it though. I hated every moment of that meeting. I love y'all. I hated that meeting as I was uncomfortable the entire time, but I was proud of myself that I said the little that I said, but I was pretty quiet. I let y'all hash it out for the most part. I was more referee.
Well, like I said, we don't like feelings in the church, and we're taught to, if this had been an evangelical event, I would have just said, well, I'm the senior here, so the rest of you shut up and we'll do what I say. And, or my pre-therapy self, when Jeremy came in and was okay, and was just like, hey, let's act like nothing happened, I would have been like, oh my God, I'm dying inside. But yeah, let's just act like nothing happened, because having the conversation would be hard. But I've learned, and I coach people in this all the time, so I have to coach myself, that I even have a training I do with business staff sometime, and it's called Conflict is Good. And then I always ask, how many of you love conflict? And sometimes there will be one smart ass that'll raise their hand or something, but none of us like conflict. But I'm a big believer that you are not in deep relationship with somebody until you have conflict and walk it through together and say, we can have conflict and stay together. Then you have real relationship. Then you've got something, because you could have walked away from one another. And if I had just been like, everything's okay, I would have carried an agenda away from that meeting with Jeremy. I would have been like, I'm hurting, Jeremy doesn't care, and I will file this away for now, but when I get the chance, I will unload it on Jeremy at some point. It's like a mom that the son, leaves the refrigerator door open accidentally and suddenly loses her shit on her son, and the son is like, what? I just left the refrigerator door open, but she's not losing her shit because the refrigerator door is left open. She's losing her shit because of all the times she's had to close a door, pick up a shoe, do all the things from behind some kid. And that's what we do if we don't bring our shit out on the table and say, hey, I'm hurting. I know this is going to be a tough conversation, but I'm going to lean into it because this honesty is going to get us to the other side of this conflict, and our relationship is going to be stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I think that it just showed me yet another place where through, the mental health journey, through the deconstruction journey, the toxic traits that evangelicalism had put in my life and in all of our lives, right? Like not just me, but, and it was so obvious that, and I even mentioned yesterday, I was like, if I go into the secular space, right, or whatever they call it, the public sphere, like I can take, that constructive criticism or that, like that give and take, like on projects or work or whatever, because that's expected. And it's like, I may have work friends, but they're work friends, right? Whereas like people that you, very evangelical phrase, like quote unquote, do life with, right? Like, cause we don't just do this show together. Like we talk about personal things and, like the stuff that like nobody sees. We share some pretty hard things together at times or some pretty exciting things together at times. And so it scared me to death. Because I was like, here are people who have all my dirty laundry, who have, poured into me. I've poured into them. Like we've walked through all this muck together, created something good. And now now I feel like I'm the outcast, which was not true. But when you get into that headspace, the immediate response is, I am not, I am not going to allow myself, to be taken on this. Like, I'm just not. And so it just like, we meet that, I think, with very weird emotions and very weird, like, mechanisms. And it's not even coping. It's just mechanisms. And it's so unhealthy. But I think about all of these times through my life. See, I went to summer camp my senior year of high school as a student. Like at the end of my senior year, I went the next year as the student pastor at a church. And so for my entire adult life, I don't know anything else. For my entire professional life, for a long time, I didn't know anything else. And the way that conflict is dealt with in those spaces is exactly like what you're talking about, Paul. It's like either A, like the person who's in charge puts their foot down and says, this is what the church stands for because this is what I stand for. Or B, it's everybody suppresses their real emotions, their real feelings, and they just pat each other on the head, pat each other on the back, and we go, oh, we're so great together. The Lord just loves you, brother. And it's all bullshit. And what it does eventually is it does exactly what you were saying, is it leads to an agenda, or it just leads to like really corrupt feelings about one another. And so then you're harboring all this resentment and all this hate, and none of it ever came out on the table, when really probably you could have had a conversation that was, like April said, very, very uncomfortable after the first instance, but you would not have all of these problems. But because of this like absolute desire by the evangelical church of like, we all have to be on the same page. We all have to pretend like we're all good. We all have to show up and act like we've got our shit together. I mean, listen, this is exactly why I ended up next to a lake with a 9mm. This is exactly why. Because it was like, you show up as a staff member, as a leader, as a church, person that everybody looks at, you're supposed to have everything together. You better not have mental health problems because you're not praying hard enough. You better not have marital problems because, you're not trusting Jesus to be the center of your foundation or whatever. And like all of this stuff. So when my career was falling apart, when my marriage was falling apart, when my life just felt like it was in shambles, I prayed as much as the next damn person. I swear to God, I prayed so much. And the problem is that all those prayers came back just null and void. And I still felt depression. I still felt anxiety. I still felt anger. I still hated myself. And that's how you end up in a space where you're ready to just shoot yourself in the head because you don't have any place to go with all of those emotions and feelings and whatever. And so as much as I like to think that I have overcome so much of that, there is still some of that rears its ugly head. And yesterday was a prime example that I am a person who is in recovery of the evangelical space. It's like my friends who are alcoholics who, they will tell you very adamantly, like, I may have been sober for 15 years, but I am still in the process of recovery. I think I am still very much in the process of recovery of the evangelical church, and sometimes those things still rear their ugly heads. And this is the exact kind of emotion that ends up getting people killed by suppressing that stuff, by ruining friendships, because it wouldn't have been y'all ruining the friendships. It would have been me, but I would have blamed you for it.
And that's also a really good, powerful statement as to why we say, "Are you okay?" And when the person says, "Yeah," but it's clear they're not okay. If we're, in the type of relationship that we want to be in, it is okay to say, "I don't think you seem okay." Go ahead, April.
I was just gonna kind of piggyback off of what Jeremy was saying, in that, I think it's so important to recognize that in ourselves, that just because we leave the evangelical church and we've deconstructed all of these things, like, to have the self-awareness that sometimes that fundamentalism or those toxic traits, like, can rear their ugly heads. Like, I've seen it in my life too, that I'm constantly having to check myself, to be like, this isn't healthy, because we don't want to become the same version of ourselves just on the other side. Like, it's trying to live this life that is loving and really caring and being vulnerable. And that's really hard and that's really scary. But I think it's just a good reminder of, you can leave the evangelical church, but does the evangelical church leave you? And just being able to recognize that in ourselves. And because in the church, especially if you're on staff or if you're a leader, there was not room to be vulnerable, like, I was always having to calculate in small group, which I hated small groups, by the way. I was always having to calculate, can I actually share what I'm going through in my real life right now? Like, how much can I share that, could show that, oh, I'm being tested by God and it's okay, and not like, oh, I'm super messed up and going through this hard time and they need to lay hands on me, and it's
tested
like
by God. Yeah.
Right. Like, we've got to have this where we become these cookie cutter versions of everybody else, and everybody knows what's like the socially acceptable, quote unquote sin or thing to be struggling with that no one will judge you too much for. But like, when Beecher and I were first married, Beecher's non-binary. They were trans. They were dealing with gender dysphoria. Sometimes I would come home and they would confess to me that they had put on one of my dresses in my closet, and we didn't understand why they were doing that. And I didn't understand it. And I felt like, okay, I need to be upset about this because this is not quote unquote normal. And Beecher would just be sobbing to me because they felt so much shame. And there was absolutely nobody that we could talk to about it in the church. And the couple times that we had tried, it was just met with, oh, well, that's definitely demonic. And we're like, oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, definitely demonic. Yeah, just forget I said anything. And it's just, there's no, the church is supposed to be the safe space, but all it is a place where you go and you put on a mask.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you sharing that, April. I know you shared it kind of on y'all's podcast, the non-binary marriage and things like that. But I just still love the vulnerability of you sharing that, because it's just such a constant reminder of like, yeah, they tell you, oh, this is a demon, or, oh, it's a problem with your heart. You need to, brother, you need to check your heart. Like I can't tell you how many goddamn times I've heard that. Brother, you need to check your heart.
Or just, have you prayed about this?
Have you prayed about this?
What is God saying to this?
Have you prayed about it? Oh, I'm getting triggered now.
No, but for real though, right? And like,
I'm not kidding. Those are triggers.
Yes.
Being called brother, by the way, is one of the triggers to begin with, because I know you don't love me like a brother,
Well, and that's the reason, and that's the reason I tell people all the time that deconstruction is the best thing that's ever happened to me, because it has made so many places in my life so much better. I tell young couples that I'm like doing marital coaching with, like, deconstructed sex is the best sex, like, on a lighter note, but on a more important note, deconstructed conflict is better conflict. And so it's like, it's this space where, and I've played the other side even at times where I was the one not allowing like us to walk away without at least just saying what we need to say, like the John Mayer principle, right? Just say what you need to say.
Yeah.
But y'all did a great job of that yesterday, of like, no, we're not going to let you recluse. We're going to tell you that we love you. We're going to tell you that you're valuable here, that you matter here. And we're going to fight this out. We're going to get to fisticuffs on the internet right now. We're going to get there. But by the time we walk away, we're going to have a show tomorrow night, and we're going to talk about things that are really relevant and really meaningful in the process of deconstruction.
Yeah.
So beauty comes out of that conflict. It's a beautiful metalwork forged by, just the fire and the steel, right? Like it's something so great that comes out on the other side. And it's the thing that the church has not figured out. And so, and I didn't mean to, and I do apologize for anybody listening and, to go so abruptly into,
well, you're getting lots of love from people in the comments, so I think you're okay.
I know. I'm generally try to be mindful of that, but it was this thing today, like in therapy, she was like, this proves that you still have work to do in the process of still dealing with your emotions in a healthy way, to not allow yourself to get back to a space where you think that you are not valuable to anyone, because that's ultimately the punchline, right? Is you get to this place where you legitimately believe that you are not good enough to be alive for anyone. And that everyone would not only be thankful that you were gone, but they would be better off that you were.
Yeah.
And so being able to convince myself that you two were against me, and that you didn't love me, and that you didn't care about me, and I have to walk away from this. Think about if I had just quit yesterday, the trauma that we all would have felt out of that.
Yeah.
Right. And like that is a really good starting point down the road of coming to this place of like, well, they don't value me, and I shared a lot of life with them, and and then the snowball starts to go.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I would recommend to people as you're listening to this, and you're like, oh, I've had a situation like that, or I am in a situation. One of the things that I think is helpful, like I asked you, Jeremy. So next time this happens, and I'm feeling like you're hiding, can I text you and say, Jeremy, I feel like you're hiding, and do I have permission to do that? And you said, yes, you do. And so now we have, a firm tactic. And one thing I just love what both of you are sharing. It's so real. And, shalom is a word I love from the Jewish language. And we translate shalom as peace. but actually shalom means wholeness. Shalom doesn't mean a lack of conflict. It means wholeness and wellness. And the Bible actually talks about having shalom in the valley of the shadow of death, that I can have a banquet in the presence of mine enemies. So conflict is not bad. This is one of the things I'm learning in my therapy, because and some of this story is going to be coming out more for me as we go. But, I had an abusive father, and my abusive father was also the pastor of our church. He was the representative of God on earth. And my job, I'm learning now as a kid, was to watch my dad's face and see, is dad okay or is dad not okay? And if dad's okay, whew, thank God, I can survive the day. But if dad's not okay, look out. All I can hope is that he's mad at one of my brothers. That's the only hope. And so in life, I've carried that watching faces. Are these people okay right now? Because I can only be okay if they're okay. I do it to my wife. And then I worked in the business world, secular, like you called it, Jeremy. And we would have business meetings where we would be like literally standing in front of each other's face saying, yeah, fuck you. No, fuck you. No, fuck you. I mean, we could scream at each other and then be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Okay, let's go to lunch. And we could go to lunch together. But when I started a church and was working in the church world, there was this thing of like, no, we're relational. And
relational.
And that relational thing again translated to me of like, I've got to watch everybody's face, because God is now my abusive father, and he's represented in these faces around me of my staff and in my parishioners. And if one of them is upset with me, I really have to be relational and work it through. And so it became that abuse all over again. And yeah, we can say that's not happening, what happened to us before when we're being abused by our father, but it feels internally exactly the same. And so we respond the same. And like you, Jeremy, there was always this running, and has been, and I still fight with this narrative of like, wouldn't the world be better if you weren't here? Yeah.
And that question that comes out of that church space, Paul, that's so astute, like what you're saying. The question that comes out of that church space is, well, did you handle it with grace? Did you give grace? Did you give grace? Did you give grace? Well, how many times do I have to be the one to give up grace before somebody gives it back in return? Because what I found is a lot of times I was meeting people's hate and despise and disgust with grace, because like that was what was expected of me. And if I ever bowed up back, like it would, I wasn't acting as a leader, a servant leader, the way Jesus would have acted. Well, Jesus flipped the fucking tables. So like at what point, like, cause sometimes it takes, sometimes it takes a fuck you. Like sometimes it takes a popping back into the camera and going, what'd you just say? Sometimes it takes that. You know what I mean? Like, and because in that, and I love what you said earlier on in the show with that, you knew once the emotions ramped, like you felt it inside yourself, like, oh, we're getting there now. Like this is going to be ugly, but we're getting there now. And I subconsciously felt that too. Like I knew that I was like, oh, well, it's all on the table now. So, you hollered at me a little bit. I decided to be a dick back. But you know what, at the end of the day, and April was just like, Jesus Christ, guys, like calm down. But at the end of the day, what it led to was something that was important, not only for evangelicals, the brand and the podcast and the whatever, but also just for our individual journeys.
Yeah.
And I hope that just like every other episode we put out, I hope that it is beneficial to the journeys of the people who listen to this as well.
Yeah. If I could say one thing too, like I don't want to sit here and say me yelling was good. That was a little bit of me losing control. But I think what I did well in that moment was then, instead of saying, oh, I'm an asshole for yelling, I did a self search, like, okay, why am I so upset? What is upsetting me about this? And I think I was able to express, like, I'm feeling an injustice right now. You accusing us of teaming up and really scheming is what I heard, made me feel injustice to the point that it brought me to yelling. And so I don't recommend we yell at each other, but when we feel ourselves boiling over, stop and say, okay, what part of me is upset and why? And let's express that. Okay, I'm going to calm down, and it's okay. Everybody even say, I need a timeout to go get a cup of coffee, which maybe I could have done that better as well. I could have said, listen, I need a moment. I'll be back. Let me get a cup of coffee. We can take a timeout, but then come back and say, okay, I yelled, I screamed, I lost control because this is what I'm feeling. I'm really hurt by XYZ. And then now really productive conversation can start.
Yeah.
I'm just really proud that none of us said that we would pray for each other in like a condescending way. Like, no, I'll pray for you for that. There was no Christianese.
No
Christianese. And even the fact, honestly, I was kind of anxious about tonight. I was like, this is like really behind the scenes personal, but there's, sometimes I'm like, what would the evangelical church do in this situation? I'm like, well, they would not talk about it and pretend like everything's fine and just move forward. I'm like, well, let's do the opposite of that and just tell everybody what happened.
That's how you breed a culture where a pastor gets up and goes, like, guys, I just wanted to share that 20 years ago I had an affair, and it was so wrong of me against my wife. And then some poor little girl is out there going, yeah, but I was fucking 16. Ugh.
That really happened though. For
that really happened.
That's like a true story.
Yes, that's a very true story. But it's that mentality of like, okay, we had this conflict, like suppress. Like we all have to come out of this room with the team narrative, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of mentality is what breeds that culture.
Yeah.
And I think that we promised a long time ago on our individual platforms, as well as this platform in particular, that we would be open and honest and we would peel the layers back. And so I think there's something very real and very important about saying, number one, hi, I'm that pastor from Oklahoma and I'm not perfect. And number two, like I'm still working through these things. And, Paul, April, like we're working through those things together.
I just want to say Jeff's comment, quote, let's just take a break and take this to God. God, we just thank you for this group. And we just ask, Lord, that. And then it becomes passive aggressive, like, God, we just ask that you really calm Paul's spirit and whatever is going on in there that made him yell, like, let him know he doesn't have to do that, God.
Can you increase Paul's discernment in this moment?
Paul's discernment.
Just soften his heart.
Aggressive prayers.
Well, and that's the small group thing too. Like if you're ever like honest, well, hey, we're fighting, we're dealing with this. It gets silent in the room, mm-hmm. and then the leader's like, well, we'll pray for you for that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, next.
Yeah, head on a swivel. Who's next?
Which guy here looks at porn? Let's talk about porn.
Well, but it's like, but don't say that. Don't say that. That'll get you ran out. What you say is, I've been struggling with lust. Brother, I've been struggling with lust. I'm
having to work on my eyes.
My eyes.
Where my little eyes.
I've got to guard my spirit.
Oh gosh.
And so we're learning that making each other feel not okay is okay. Like, you know what I'm saying? There are times in relationship where we have to say, my needs and your needs are butting up against each other right now. And so we need to talk this through, or else, again, we're fungus grows in the dark, right? If we keep it in the dark, it's going to start to spread and it's going to start to affect other things. But when we say, I'm going to, and truly, again, it sounds sort of campy in the Christian world, but because I want to have relationship with you going forward, I'm going to be honest, even though I know honesty is going to make you hurt and the rest of us cringe. And we may even have moments where we sit in awkward silence for a minute or two. But in the end, we're going to get through this conflict together and our relationship will be stronger on the other side. And we don't have to go our separate ways for disagreeing.
I was going to say, I really like this comment by Holda My Waffles. I like that name. An acronym: RELAX, RELAX. R, recognize your anger signals. E, empathize and see the other person's point of view. L, listen. A, accept the person's anger is not about you. And X, out the past and keep it in the present. I feel like I need to like save that.
Yeah,
That's
good. And
Holda
that's
My Waffles is a therapist.
Yeah.
and that's a lot of what our discussion was like. Jeremy, if we feel like you missed a deadline and we want to hold you accountable to that, that's not because we think you're a terrible person. That's not because we want to throw you out of the gang. You know, it's we want to be accountable to you. We want you to be accountable to us, and those are the things that we, you know, that's the honesty that we were working through together. What we were saying and what you were hearing were two very different things, and that we got to bridge that gap for it to be a profitable discussion.
Well, and the depth of that goes even further in the sense of like, you know, we were taught, and I don't even know if this is like exclusive to evangelicalism. I think it's just our culture, but we're taught that like, you know, that busyness and being, you know, in as many things as possible, as much as possible, is a good characteristic, you know, being workaholics and overcommitted. And so, you know, something that came out of that conversation was not so much like, you know, Jeremy, you didn't turn in your homework. Like I never felt like that, but it was more like, hey, do we really actually have the bandwidth for,
right,
you know, to do these bigger things? When, you know, we really need to just work on, you know, kind of keeping the main thing. And,
well, and if I can interrupt you, just like what I heard you saying is I overcommit because I feel value through doing that. That's what I was taught in the church. By doing, I feel value. So then I overcommit, and this may be me adding to it, but then shame comes when you don't meet your commitment. And so we know working is where our value is because that's what the church taught us. We overcommit, then we don't make it, and then we feel shame because we haven't met God's expectation for us.
Yeah, we worship the work of the Lord instead of the Lord of the work.
Yeah, and didn't even get your quiet time in. You got to set your alarm for 5 a.m. to do the quiet time before you do all the things you said yes to.
Yes, that's exactly right. But it's this drive, and it's why pastors burn out so bad, right? Like even evangelical pastors who stay in evangelicalism, it's why they burn out so much. It's because they're just spread so thin. It's why their marriages fall apart.
Not even just pastors, just being on church staff.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you know,
volunteer even.
Yeah, I was like, I'm thinking about our conversation with Janice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
her
she was a volunteer.
Yeah, she was a volunteer working 40 hours a week. You know, and so I think that's true, and yes, you know, and that's something I had to check as well. Like I had to check that. Somebody mentioned earlier, like, you know, deconstructing the theology is one thing, but then also like working to deconstruct the framework is a whole nother piece. Mm-hmm. And I still really have to struggle with the framework piece of like, I remember early on in my career, I was like 21, 22. My wife and I had been married for a couple of years, and she was like, Jeremy, you're just never home. Like you work so hard at the church and being a good student pastor and being a good, you know, worship leader and like all of these things, but I never see you. And so, you know, she was like, the church matters more to you than me. And, so that's something I had to answer to early on. And that caused a lot of grief and turmoil in our relationship. But,
well, it's joy as Jesus, others you.
Yeah. Always put yourself last.
And, you know, I think we miss, like, Jesus' mom and brothers were there one day and he said, hey, that's not my family. This is my family. Right. Yeah. You know, so, I mean, it goes against a little bit of what you're saying, but we feel like we have obligations that we have to meet. And the story of Jesus is he knew when to put boundaries up and say, this is not okay. He knew when to say, get behind me, Satan, to Peter. I mean, I love that is a great example of conflict to me in that the start of Matthew 16, you know, Peter says, "You're the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus says, "Peter, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, man. I'm going to start my church on you. You are the rock." And then just a few verses later, he's like, "Get behind me, Satan." He's calling Peter Satan. And then Matthew 17, though, then Peter, James, and John are the only disciples that go with Jesus to the Mount of Transfiguration. And so we see that dynamic of working together in love and being able to say, this is great, this wasn't your best, but that doesn't disqualify you from being a part of me and a part of my team. And I love that.
There was even a story in Mark, kind of exactly what you're talking about, where Jesus like recused himself from a giant crowd, and the disciples were like, "Hey, there's still a bunch of people that we need to heal here." And he was like, I need to go pray. Like, I'm not bound by what you say I need to do or what they think I need to do. Like, and so, I don't know. I think yesterday was a good reality check for me to go, there is still a lot of that toxicity of the American evangelical church that still very much like lives and dwells inside of me at times. And occasionally, you'll bust a pocket of toxicity and it'll rear its ugly head. And, then all of a sudden you're kind of back in that same framework. And so, but what's great is having friends that you meet on TikTok who are willing to have those hard conversations. And then we can get out in front of the world on YouTube and pour
the
this
next day.
The next day.
It's just barely been 24
weird,
hours.
Though? Like I felt no anxiety coming into tonight.
Oh, that's good.
I did. If I'm being honest. I feel like,
I felt anxiety sharing. I didn't feel anxiety with y'all.
Oh yeah, I didn't feel it with y'all, but like being a preacher's kid my whole life, I deal with a lot of like what people think and just like naturally like, you have things together. You just always have things together, and there's just that little piece in me that dies on the inside of like, oh, people know we don't have it together, which we never have, but it's like exposed. It's just feeling exposed.
I was by no stretch of the imagination a fan of sharing this story tonight. Let me,
it was a good idea you had, though.
Yeah. Let me back up and say I had no anxiety sitting in this space with y'all. I feel very much loved, more loved than I did yesterday. As far as that's concerned, I had a lot of anxiety about sharing this. I was like, I don't know if I need to put that out in the world.
Well, I think you did a really wonderful job, and I do appreciate both of you being vulnerable and talking about it. And I think that's one thing that is cool about Evangelicalish and this weird random thing that we started almost 2 years ago. And I think we should pat ourselves on the back that it took a whole 2 years before Paul yelled.
And before Jeremy was very pretentious.
It's, like I said, my contribution, my unhealthy contribution to this is people pleasing. And when I was in the church world, they called it fear of man. You have fear of man. And it was this horrible, dastardly thing. And in therapy, I realized, well, of course you are a people pleaser. That's how you survived.
Yes.
And so I hope that I'm getting better at recognizing, okay, this is my people pleaser kicking in. And my people pleaser is a good part of me because they have saved my life for 57 years. But now I have to then go to my people pleaser and say, remember, we can do this now. We're an adult now. We can have adult conversations, Jeremy.
Yes.
And then help my people pleaser stand down, not as this evil fear of man part of me, but this really good protector that I can say, hey, we have other, better, healthier ways to protect ourselves now. And I just find when I do that, then I start to break through the old patterns of my life.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate you guys allowing me to do that and be there of being able to say whatever, yell. I'm trying to remember what I yelled. That's not true, I think was the actual words that I yelled. But
no,
it was...
the coffee, the Kofifi cup, The coffee cup went down and that's not true. And I was like,
but
oh.
but what I was really yelling is, I'm feeling injustice and it needs to be expressed. So I didn't do it in my healthiest way, but we got there, and I really appreciate it. And I've heard this, I think, from both of you over the last couple of days. It's like, how do we do conflict differently than the evangelical church so we don't become what we despised about what we left?
Yeah. And I think we're discovering that, and kind of in real time. And I think that's why it was so important that we talk about this tonight too.
Because, by the way, deconstructing Christians can still be petty.
Yes. Just go on TikTok, my friends. Just dig around for a moment in the deconstruction space. You will find.
Petty is not always bad.
I know we have a
no,
friend
petty's
that
not
petty
always
is
bad.
Gift, but yeah.
I'm just saying it very much exists inside the space.
When petty becomes denominational, let's say we're the right deconstructionist and you are the wrong deconstructionist,
right.
then we are what we despise.
Well, finger snaps all around, virtual hugs, and we didn't plan a fun, we didn't have a mid-roll, we didn't plan a fun thing at the end. We will get back to our fun.
Yes, we will.
Silliness next week for our anniversary show.
2-year anniversary.
Yeah.
2-year anniversary show. Would just encourage y'all maybe inside the private Facebook group, or in particular, if you're a part of the Ish community, evangelicalish.com, you can join the Ish community, $5 a month. We have some really exciting new stuff rolling out too. We're gonna be offering an episode a month? Is that what we said?
I think so.
Am I speaking out of school?
Behind the curtain, or?
Yeah. So we're going to give an episode a month. It's going to be kind of like this, and probably not as much conflict, but or at least, God, I hope so. But just kind of talking about some deeper subjects, and that'll be available to everyone in the Ish community, whether you be at the beast, false prophet, or antichrist level. And so come join the Ish community, evangelicalish.com. You can join the Ish community, get some behind the scenes content. And then, so if you're a part of that community, drop a comment on the, on the thread there, on the page there, and tell us some of your favorite memories from the last couple of years. We would love to hear y'all, how long you've been listening. We want to hear from folks about how long they've been listening and all that kind of stuff. So drop that on the Facebook page, drop that on the Ish community page. And we would definitely love to get some of that in for next week, because next week's gonna be 2 years, guys.
Woohoo!
So. And I really do love you both. After the show last week, when you weren't here, Jeremy, we discussed like, ooh, it's awkward for a male and a female to say we love each other, but we do love each other.
That was when y'all were colluding, right? Was that when that happened?
That was when we were making our master plan.
We were saying we love each other, but Jeremy,
we literally broke the virtual Billy Graham rule to do it.
The virtual Billy Graham rule.
Yes, we did. Mike Pence was very disappointed in it.
Oh, was he here though? No. Okay.
Paul in the chat says 2 years and 20 seasons. Yeah.
2 years and 20. Listen, if you know jokes about season numbers, then you've been here for a hot minute.
But now since we've revamped, we're in season 3.
Yeah, we're in season 3, like very early in season 3, by the way. So.
All right. Yeah. I love y'all. Yay, group hug.
Love you too.
Yay.
Good
and
show,
thanks
everyone.
For listening to our tea. I hope it was hot enough for y'all.
That was definitely, I think it had some degrees to it.
And we got through the triggers together.
Yes.
Yes, we did. All right, y'all. Do us a favor. Leave us a comment. Let us know how long you've been listening. Last but never least, if you're listening on the podcast, it comes out every Thursday on your favorite podcasting platform. Leave a review, leave 5 stars, especially on Apple and Spotify. Write a review, tell people why they should listen, so we can just continue to grow the community and connect with more people. So for Paul and April, I'm Jeremy. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love these two a whole bunch, and I love y'all as well. All right, we'll talk to you later.